Every country on Earth is drowning in debt. The United States, over $38 trillion. Europe, $14 trillion. Japan, $9 trillion. The global debt? Over $315 trillion. That's 3 times the size of the entire world economy. So here's the real question: if everyone owes money, who's the creditor? Who do we actually owe trillions to? And how can the system still function if no one's really paying it back? Let's start with something strange. Governments don't actually pay off their debt. They roll it over. Constantly. Every year, old bonds expire, and new ones are issued. The interest gets refinanced, not repaid. It's like taking a new credit card to pay off the old one, forever. So how can that possibly work? Because in today's world, debt itself is money. When a government issues bonds, those bonds are bought by banks, pension funds, even other governments. Those bonds then become assets, collateral. They are used to print more money, to back more loans, to fuel more debt. Debt creates money. Money creates more debt. And the cycle continues. So when you hear that America is broke, that's not exactly true. Because the system was designed to stay in debt, permanently. Okay, so if the United States owes $38 trillion, who's holding the bill? About 25% of it is owned by foreign nations, like Japan, China, and the UK. But the majority, over 70%, is owned inside the country itself. By the Federal Reserve, American banks, pension funds, corporations, and even regular citizens through treasury bonds. In other words, America mostly owes money to Americans. But here's the twist: the people who own that debt are not the same as the people who pay for it. The interest payments come from taxpayers. The profits go to investors, banks, and the top 1%. So debt isn't just an obligation, it's a transfer of power. It moves wealth from the many to the few. And this system doesn't just control money, it controls nations. In ancient times, debt meant slavery. If you couldn't repay, you became the collateral. Today, it's not individuals, it's countries. They don't lose their freedom with chains, they lose it with interest payments. When poor nations borrow from institutions like the IMF or World Bank, they agree to conditions. Raise taxes. Cut social spending. Privatize industries. Sound familiar? It's called debt diplomacy. And it's one of the most effective tools of modern empire. The same way kings once conquered with armies, today's powers conquer with loans. Because you don't need to invade a country to control it, you just need to own its debt. Here's the craziest part. None of this would work if people stopped believing in it. The entire financial system is built on trust, not gold, not assets, but faith. When you buy a government bond, you're not buying value, you're buying a promise. A promise that the system will keep spinning. And as long as people believe, the illusion survives. But what happens when that faith breaks? When nations default, when people stop trusting the money, when debt loses its magic, empires fall. Because every empire in history, from Rome to Britain to Wall Street, was built on credit. And every one of them collapsed the same way, when belief ran out. So, who is the world's real creditor? There isn't one single face or nation. The creditor is the system itself, a self-feeding machine of debt, trust, and control. Governments owe banks. Banks owe central banks. Central banks owe no one, because they print the money everyone else owes. It's not a pyramid. It's a loop. A circle of debt that keeps the empire alive. But every loop has a breaking point. The question is, when this one snaps, what comes next? Because maybe debt was never meant to be repaid. Maybe it was meant to bind us. To keep nations obedient. To keep people working. To keep the empire spinning. And maybe, the next revolution won't start with guns, but with someone simply asking. If everyone's in debt, who really owns the world?